Hi, everyone. Welcome to my Father's House Church to the training. And also, those of you that are watching online, or you're watching on Facebook, and some of you are watching online to watch the live streaming as we are going to go through our training for recap with Deborah Reyes and Tony Morales. So, this officer, Tony Morales. So, those of you that are watching online, so that we know that you have participated in this training, we'd like you to go to mfhlv.com. No, that's the web page. We're going to go to an email, mfhlvnv@gmail.com, and send us an email, shoot us an email that tells us that you have participated in the class so that we can confirm that, because we don't have a sign-up sheet for you guys to sign in, so you're going to have to sign in online. So you go to the email at mfhlvnv@gmail.com and send us and shoot us an email, and Lisa will get it tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and have Pastor Jose, does he want to say anything, or he's not in here. Praise God. Well, I'm going to have Deborah Reyes and Tony Morales go ahead and come on up here, and they're going to go ahead and teach the class. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks, everybody, for attending out there online.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah. This is Tony. Hello. How many of you have attended recap training in the past? Well, thank you. And some of you have not yet attended this training? Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for welcoming us back home to my Father's house. We always love coming here at least once a year and doing this training. The recap section of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is with us in the Office of Community Engagement, but it is a valley-wide program. And so Connie, I ran into her in the hallway the other day. You know, she has got not a very important job at Metro. We run into each other in the hall, and she said, you know, it might be a good idea to talk a little bit about what y'all are doing in the Office of Community Engagement. And unfortunately, one of the primary coordinators of some of the new programs couldn't be here tonight, so I'm going to cover a little bit of that. The Office of Community Engagement was created by the sheriff in the year 2015 in July. And it really is a catch-all and a resource for all of the area commands. We have 10 area commands throughout the valley. And we have 3 major sections right now. The Community Outreach, Redirection, and Education section, which looks at how to interrupt cycles of violence with youth in particular. It houses the Police Athletic League, a Violence and Gang Prevention Detail, which is where we started in the Gang Crimes Bureau. Did I mention the Police Athletic League? I did already, right? And also certain specialized outreach functions that we do there. Then we have our Fusion Liaison Officer program, and that is the counterterrorism component of community outreach. So they specialize in working with businesses and churches and synagogues and mosques to keep everybody safe. And we also have some overlap because there are youth that have the potential to become radicalized. Just like we have youth that join gangs. And some of those things that occur in both of those scenarios. So they're there to educate and do awareness training and all of that. Then we just recently created something called the Behavioral Health Unit. About a year and a half ago, our homeless outreach team, which is 17 officers, and a civilian coordinator, Dr. Annie Wilson, joined us. And we do all this identifying programs, referrals, and outreach for people who are facing cycles of homelessness or the possibility of homelessness. And we also created about 2.5 years ago a section that they now call LEMA, and I don't know what that acronym stands for, but it's LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And those officers specialize in something we call a harm reduction model. And the harm reduction model may not be very popular, but we're seeing it work nationwide. And what it is why do we keep throwing low-level misdemeanants who are using small amounts of drugs and in the cycles and patterns of committing misdemeanor crimes? Why are we sending them to jail as opposed to sending them to treatment? So we have officers that are becoming subject matter experts in that. And then we invited the idea, we started thinking about how people who are homeless suffer with drug addiction and also have a lot of mental illness, and that's an area where we fall short in our city. We're not the only city that falls short, but we fall short here in terms of resources and benefits for people who are undergoing cycles of emotional distress and mental illness and the variations of mental illness. So we invited our crisis intervention team, which is a team of maybe 4 to 6 officers right now. And they have formed the behavioral health unit. All 3 units are working together in tandem. We were joined, and then we said, oh my gosh, well, we're cops, we're not social workers. So how are we gonna do all of this? How are we gonna help all these people? So we partnered with the university, UNLV, and they have a social work practicum that all of their students have to do on the field if they're gonna get a master's degree. So we have a cadre of about 12 students, and those 12 students are partnering with the police department. They're getting some practical experience. They're doing all of our referrals. We're partnering with all of these agencies to intercept all of these patterns of, unwellness, and hopefully reduce the number of people that we arrest and increase the number of people that we help. So that's, that's kind of what's been going on in the Office of Community Engagement. Who knows what RECAP stands for? Shout it out. Rebuilding every city around peace. So we started doing this when, Tony? A long time ago. So, by the way, Tony Morales is a very revered and high-level detective who's very humble, and he just celebrated 30 years with the department. I don't think so. Anyway, in 2006, we started actively engaging with our community partners, our faith-based partners, a lot of social service agencies. And in the Bolden Area Command at that time, we just had a massive amount of gun violence between kids that were involved in gangs. And we just had to do something differently. And so this whole idea of people who can help us, the police department, respond to these violent events started taking hold. And we saw that when we did that in 2006, we saw a 40% drop in all of those retaliatory shootings. So all of this really stems from how do we stop the cycles of violence? Of course, we want to prevent it on the front end, but we know when something bad happens, it leads to more and more escalation of violence. So that's how this all started. Faith-based leadership has been the cornerstone of the success of this program. Because of churches like this who coordinate with our area commands around these response teams, and because you're in the community and people could come back to you after the fact and actually be welcomed here as their home church, you have support and resources that we don't have when we're following up with a family that survived that type of crime, when they lose a loved one after a shooting. So our faith-based partners have been really at the forefront of this program. We could not have done it without all of you. So we went to Washington in 2012, and we used to call this program Safe Village Initiative because it was out of Bolden. Once we came back from Washington, D.C., and we met a gentleman by the name of Reverend Jeffrey Brown, thank you. we decided that we would expand the program to every single area command, and that we would recruit volunteers that would work locally with every area command and become the responders that will work with those captains, lieutenants, sergeants, and patrol officers and detectives to help quash the violence. And that was called the 10 Points Coalition. And I'm going to send you this PowerPoint so you could distribute it. It has become a Metro priority, but it also, that's our former detective Bernard Plaskett, who retired about a year and a half ago. Yeah. So this is a true partnership. And when I was about to say about the fact that this has been a priority is that we have been approached by a lot of other states. We have a program where LVMPD has a contract with the State Department, and we've traveled internationally to teach recap. We've retrofitted recap for police departments all over Africa, Brazil, and many other countries. And they utilize it in interesting ways, differently, but they have been developing these types of relationships with their faith-based communities to stop certain crimes. And so it's become something that we celebrate and we're really proud of. So it's a compassionate intervention, and it really is a response to a trauma. And so, let's see, where'd you go? So I think what I want to say here is that when I first started in 2008, and Tony and I and Bernard were asked to start a gang prevention program. Most of the cops that we would tell about, if you see anybody in a gang, if you meet siblings that are in a gang, let us know. We'll go, we'll talk to them, we'll refer them to programs, we'll try to get them out of the gang. And we had all these crazy ideas. And at that time, those ideas would not take hold because cops were like, look, you're a criminal, you're going away. I became a cop to arrest the bad guys. But slowly but surely in the last 12 years, I think he will share with you when he gets up to talk, that we have seen a shift in police culture. Because if I'm here telling you that we have an Office of Community Engagement that has a behavioral health unit, I think the culture has shifted. And police officers now are being trained to be more community-oriented and to look for ways of working with everyone to address the problems, because there's no other way to do it, really. And I just did something bad here. Let's see. Why did I lose a slide? Oh, okay. So this is our goal, and we're going to cover a couple of basic areas tonight, and Tony's going to get up and talk about some of the practical things. But what we try to do is establish a volunteer cadre within every area command so that you become the people, the go-tos for the captains and lieutenants. And I think we'll invite the pastor up to talk in a little while. We're going to cover what an activation is, phase 1 and 2, how you would be called out. In this church, you have a mechanism to be called out. I already addressed this. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the crime scene and the sanctity of the crime scene. Because you are going to be called to situations where, number one, it's very important for you to not share with the general public what you're witnessing, observing, hearing, because you're an extension of us, and we're inviting you to, our work domain. But it's also important that that confidentiality remains and that we understand that we're working together to solve that crime. We're also going to cover a little bit about grief. We're going to ask Pastor Jose and anyone else who wants to share about what their experience have been in the field, so you have an idea of that, and just talk a little bit about the things to say and not to say. And then we're going to talk a tiny bit about the traffic, even though I know you're going to invite the officer from the traffic, Kelly from traffic, to talk about that other opportunity for volunteerism. And then we're going to go through very quickly the vetting process, the fingerprint process, and what you have to do to get your recap ID. So thank you once again. I think I'm going to turn it over to Tony. These are the basic volunteer opportunities, but we're going to get to these at the end. I think I'll round up at the end with that. These are just pictures from a lot of events. I think over the last 8 years, we have been to hundreds of recap events, and we're just so grateful for them. All right, so I'm going to give you the mic. Do you want me to? We're on live stream. We have to set a good example. And you see, when we're both standing up here, usually we interrupt each other. And today we're not doing that because we're behaving and we're distancing.
Yes, because. Oh,
Wait a minute.
oh yeah, see, they put your mic and my mic.
Yes, see, they did that. They did the yin-yang thing. I didn't even realize it. How far does it work?
I don't know.
Novi.
You could go sit down. You could yell from over there.
Here, Officer Novi.
Yes, I brought my queen with me today. She's the one that keeps me level. Otherwise, I'd be a mess. So that's, God brought her to me and said, hey, take care of him. So, oh, holy smokes, what did I just do? Oh, man. Yeah, how do I messed it up. All right, go back. All right, we're going to keep talking about recap, but like Deb said, I've been on 30 years and I've had a great career. If you would have told me 30 years ago that my job would have been to go out and help those that really need help, guide youth and redirect them, I would have said, no, cops are supposed to go out, chase the bad guy, get shot at, get into fights, all that good stuff that cop stuff has. But even as a young officer, I've been blessed where, I can honestly say that God has used me the way he wanted to use me. Because there's several officers on this department that while I was in the gang unit, I grabbed them by the ear when they were youngins, and I would say, get your head out your duffel bag, and because you're going to end up over here. And now they're officers in Metro. And I've been approached by them as my career has gone, and they're like, hey, do you remember me? And I'm like, no. And I've been better at that because my wife usually tells me, be nice. Because usually I'm like, no, I don't know you. I mean, what the heck? Why would I know you? So she always reminds me to be nice. So I try to be nice. Isn't that right, Pastor? And I'm always a happy guy too, by the way. And I smile often. So if you would have told me that I'd be doing this right now, I would have been like, no way. And that just goes to show how the culture in policing has changed so much. Where way back, if you think about some of the older cops that came before me, they knew their beat, and the people knew them. So we're going back to that, where the officers know their beat, know the neighborhoods they're policing, and the people know them. Where we're more about prevention, outreach, and redirection. Where we come to a scene and I might respond to this house for this crime, but while I'm there, I notice there's no food in the cupboards. The little kid doesn't have a bed to sleep on. So the officers now know, what can we do to make this better for this family? It's not just there to handle what's going on, it's beyond that. Because we don't want to go back, we don't want to come back here. So that's where our office comes into play. They call us, say, hey, we have this family, can you guys, they need food, they need a bed, they need, whatever they need. And then Deb has been amazing. When she came on, and she has all these contacts, because we all go to her. Hey, Deb, we need this. And she's like, okay, hold up. She goes through her Rolodex. So it works. And she said, okay, here, let's call this person. But the officers know that in today's culture that let's not just go there and handle this. Let's see what other underlying issues are there. And that's what we do. So we get them food, we get them a bed, we get them what they need so that we can prevent further stuff from happening and we don't have to come back to that home. And that's where you guys come into play. When I say guys, I mean ladies as well. See, I'm learning to be better about that stuff. That's where y'all come into play. Because houses of worship are something that's not going to go away. You are here. This is your neighborhood. So when we have somebody that's in need, in crisis, especially when it comes to recap, when we get a shooting, a violent, and we hey, we need to recap people to come out here, and you guys respond, you don't only just touch their family and help them, comfort them, but then you give them somewhere where they can come back to. And that's what the benefit of the partnership that we have comes into play. We get so much more by partnering with you than you do with us. You might think that you get a lot. Hey, we got the police with us, but no, we have you guys with us. So you guys actually are our backup, and you make us look so good. So I thank you for your service and everything that you do for our community. So, talking about recap. Phase one. Phase one is right there when it happens. A shooting happens, a homicide happens, a gang-related incident happens, something that shocks the conscience happens. An example of that will be where years ago there were some kids getting off a school bus, elementary school kids, getting off a school bus, and they had to walk around 2 dead bodies in order to get to their apartment. And for those kids, that was normal. Should that be normal? What was that? No, it shouldn't be normal. But they lived in a neighborhood that violence, drugs, prostitution, gangs, and all that was common. So when we heard about the double homicide and the kids having to go through that, you're like, no, that can't be. So phase one, they went out there. For phase one, you'll be called out. Let me see, where am I? Yeah, racially motivated, available intelligence of probable retaliation. And when we have all that information, it's when the officer on the scene, the detective or the sergeant or lieutenant, will make the call. We need the recap volunteers to come out. My clicker's falling asleep over there. Incident where phase one would come into play. Vegas. Okay, there you go. Cancer, aggression, shock to conscience. Homicide, large-scale events like 1 October. Those are things where you guys will come into play. And it did happen. When 1 October happened, we reached out to our recap partners, and you all were there alongside of us. Not just helping everyone that was touched by that, but helping all the officers that had to deal with that. Remember, we are not immune to any of this. Houston? So this is how it goes. And that's why I love my father's house. I was having lunch with another pastor today. Sorry, pastor. I have other pastors that I associate with. And he said, man, I can't believe my father's house, you people. He said, my father's house has this recap thing locked down. He said, they have Southeast locked down, the area command. So other pastors in other churches know how well of a job you guys do. And I said, well, then just do what they do. I said, just copy them. They're doing a good thing. What happens is, on the phase one, they'll call out a recap. They say, hey, we need recap responders. And then they'll call one of your team leaders And then that team leader will call you folks out to go out to the scene. Yep, you're notified. And the thing is with phase one responders, and this is what I tell folks, know you. This is going to be something that you're going to be called to. It could be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or it could be 1 o'clock in the morning. And you're going to be responding to possibly a crime scene where there's a dead body, where there might be blood everywhere, you know, a dead body. And not everyone is comfortable with that. If it's for me, I'm not here. And I'm okay with stuff like that, but not everyone is. So you got to think about that. Do you want to be part of that? I tell people, most importantly, to know you. If you're not comfortable with that, don't sign. You don't have to sign up to be a phase one responder. That's okay. There's plenty of opportunities for you to serve. And the locations where you can be called to will be the crime scene, where the body is, the hospital, where in the hospital you might encounter a grieving family member, an angry family member. And these are dynamic things that you're going to be involved. The victim's residence, you might have to go to someone's house. And let me remind you, you will not go to these places by yourself. You will have an officer with you. It won't be me. When you respond and when you guys go out with the officers, you got to remind them of your role. Number one is you are a volunteer. You're not an employee of LVMPD. Because if you're a phase one responder, you'll get a little volunteer badge. But you're not an employee of Metro. You're a volunteer. So this way, that does so many things for you. That's why you guys get so much more than we do. When they see the officer in uniform, what does that uniform do to people? Intimidate them, right? It puts a wall up, right? Like, holy smoke, I can't talk to that person. But they see you guys, and they're like, I can talk to them. I can tell them how I feel, and they will listen to me. So you go in that, in that role. You'll be permitted, if you respond to a phase one, to a briefing, which means you'll be getting sensitive information about what happened. And, the dynamics of the scene. And most importantly, what you're going to be is that bridge between the grieving family person and the officers that are investigating the crime. Because I'm sure Pastor can tell you, or anyone that's responded to a phase one where there's been a dead body, as a family member, I want to know what's going on with my loved one. Why is my loved one still laying on that ground? Right? And as the officer, my job is to focus on investigating, making sure nobody contaminates this scene, and getting all my ducks in a row. So when I catch the person that committed this crime, they can be prosecuted. Is the officer going to have time to be going back and forth? Bless you. Every time saying, hey, we're doing this with that. No, the officer's focused on his job. So that's where your job comes in, where you can say, go to someone that's in charge, say, hey, what's going on? We have a timeline? And then you go back to the family member, say, this is where they are. You're that bridge. And you'll see, I've seen it plenty of times where a recap person has done that bridge thing. Amazing. Because as a family member, they're so upset, they want answers. The officer's busy. First of all, you got the young patrol guy standing there, don't pass my yellow tape. Okay? And they're going to ask him, what's going on? He's going to say, I don't know. They're doing their thing over there. But you can go back and say, hey, they're working on this. They're doing this, they're doing that. Whatever the detective tells you to respond. Where am I? You change slides? Okay, change slides. No, how to forward it? Yes. Control issues.
It's really important that when you're communicating your role or when you're there to pay attention to the signs of retaliation. That's one of the things that we're looking for. It's one of the things that we count on you to tell us how tense the situation is. What is your role? It's the one on the bottom. What is your role? You're a peace warrior. You're a prayer warrior. You're there to calm. You're there to diffuse the situation. There have been countless examples of young men who lost a sibling or a cousin or an uncle who are raring to go and shoot whoever did this. And we have been able to really stop them in their tracks, spend time with them, speak to them, listen to them, pray with them if they choose that that's something that they want for themselves. And we've been successful. And I know that our agency appreciates that we have, even though we can't always prove a negative, but we know just from the situation and just being able to tell anecdotally, look, we had a really, really volatile thing just happen, and we don't see any more violence as a result of this incident. So that's a little bit about your role. Oh, you're going to talk crime scene.
Crime scene.
I don't think there's a handout. I think I put it right in here.
Okay. So don't review the handout.
I don't give a handout. Go ahead.
We don't need no stinking handouts.
Give me the slide.
The clicker?
Why aren't we on, why aren't we do phase 2? I guess later we do phase 2,
I think
huh?
so.
Oh, no, phase 2.
Okay, phase 2. Phase 2 is after the fact. After the scene's been secure, after everything's been happened. Usually happens within any time, whether it be 24 to 72 hours, or even a week later if it needs to. That's where you get an opportunity to do either neighborhood canvases, go knock on doors, and talk to the affected community. An example of that was down in Northeast, a lady ended up murdering her little 2-year-old daughter. And a lot of the neighbors knew about the baby. They knew that there was something wrong in the house, but no one really called. Then when they saw the police and they found out what happened, they were all very shocked. They were hurt. This little child, was murdered. So we were able to go with you folks out there with our recap responders and knock on doors, talk to the neighbors, offer them prayer, offer them comfort, and because we believe that the local churches, the area command churches are the ones that should be engaged. They were able to say, hey, if you need anything further, our church is just down the street. You're welcome to come, and if you want to talk some more or anything like that. So that's a phase 2.
Let me just go. Let's see. I feel like the PowerPoint did its own thing. It's so bizarre.
It's possessed.
Phase 2 activation, it happens within 72 hours or longer. I think really between phase 2 and phase 1 is that immediate assistance that's needed. It's that crisis point. Phase 2 can happen anytime afterwards.
Correct.
And it could be a vigil, it could be a barbecue,
A prayer walk.
It could be anything like that. And so the purpose of that is to reassure everyone that we're working together to solve the issue. Working together, that's my prayer today, post-election day, that we all remember that we are working together regardless of our opinions, right? But anyway, I digress. It's about healing. It's about community. It's about reassuring, and it's about working together to make people know that we care about them and we want them to feel safe.
And in the phase 2, again, you will not go alone. You have an officer with you. We've seen it in times where we have knocked on the door and you guys have said, hey, we're with Recap and we just want to tell you about what happened the other day. Do you know what happened? And some people were like, oh, yeah, this happened. And then, by the way, yeah, it was Snoopy that did it because we saw him running and his ears were flopping all over the place. So you guys, again, that's where you have to have your listening ears on because sometimes people will tell you stuff that they normally won't tell an officer. So you go there to offer them service and comfort, and sometimes they'll tell you, hey, yeah, so-and-so did it. And that's when you go to the officer and say, hey, they say something. So, and again, you're not there to solicit that. You're there to try to comfort them, but sometimes people talk. Where am I? Oh, phase three. Phase three. Phase three happens, it's usually a funeral. We've had instances in the past where the family had needed funeral services, and our pastors have been so amazing where they offer the family assistance and help them with that. And a lot of times the family will ask the area command captain to come and speak at that service and offer a message of peace and a hope that the family might need at the time.
Okay. Any questions about the phases or your role during those phases? No? Okay. That's a phase two, normally. And you know, I have to say, there's been a lot of confusion about the activations and the phases, even in and amongst our patrol officers and even our high-ranking officials at Metro. So I think from our point of view, knowing that the phase one is the critical, and you really have to have a heart for that because you're going to be exposed to some very serious stuff. Phase two is the follow-up, and it could take form of a visit. It could take form as a knock and talk or as a canvas with other officers that were going through the community, prayer vigils, and anything else that soothes the community, and that a church like this usually is a leader in terms of deciding what's in the best interest of a community that's just suffered that type of a blow. And we know that in this church, you're kind of very expert at that, because you haven't just leaned into something after the fact. You've leaned into how to prevent this from happening in the first place. So, those canvases take place after the fact. It could be a week or two later. The only time it doesn't happen right away, within a few days, is if homicide tells us,
Hold up a second.
yeah, they tell us that we're going to interfere with something and they don't want us to do it.
Yeah, because everything that we do as far as recap or outreach is done with the communication that we have with those investigative details. So if they're still working on something critical, we clear it with them before we go.
So Kelly couldn't be here tonight, but I will just say that I know she's going to be invited to come and make a separate presentation, and she does a really wonderful job with it. But kudos to the model that we developed, because at some point the Traffic Bureau decided to use our recap model for the activations, and critical crash is another opportunity. And we'll count that as if you go through the vetting process and you want to do critical crash work, which is you'll be called to a scene where somebody was fatally killed in a car crash, or after the fact, you make calls to the family to support them, to ask them if there's any needs that they have, things that we cannot do personally as the police department, but that has made a huge difference for families who are the victim of, are the survivors of someone who's a victim of a critical crash. So I know that you'll have that presentation separately, but it's the same model. It's a phase one and phase two, and she's brilliant and wonderful, and I know you'll enjoy hearing that from her. Okay, so this is the crime scene integrity that I included in here. Yeah, no, you're the cop. I'm just, you know.
I am the police's. Okay, so the main goal of a crime scene. Our main goal is
I'll interrupt anyway.
Yeah, she does that. Go ahead. So the main goal is to solve a crime. That's it. Solve the crime. To catch the perpetrator who injured, hurt, killed the loved one. To prevent further violence. Also, the key thing in the crime scene is when something happened, and the crime scene could be as small as this room right here, or I've had crime scenes that have been 5 blocks long, where it's a running gun battle, and my scene went from here all the way down, 5 blocks. So our goal in crime scene is to prevent and preserve all the evidence that we can collect in that. The key thing is to protect it. And we protect the crime scene. Number one is when the officers arrive there, they'll set up a perimeter around the scene. They'll look for evidence, you know, a body, casings, blood, something that shows that something happened there. And they'll put up a tape. And have any of you seen that tape before? What color is it? Yellow. And did you cross that yellow tape? That's it, I'm done. They're good. No. So what we do in the crime scene is we separate witnesses, victims, suspects, because everyone sees things differently, correct? And then calls to notify the proper detectives and prepare for a briefing. And the briefing consists of, once we've secured the scene, we've identified the evidence, we've called our crime scene analyst to come out, we label and tag all the evidence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they go into the letters A, B, C, D. Where am I? Yep, yellow crime scene tape, do not cross. And then the red tape is the inner perimeter. So there's two tapes. I don't know if they use the red tape still, but they have an outer perimeter and the inner perimeter. The inner perimeter is for the people investigating that crime alone. That means that no one else is allowed in there, not even other officers. What happens if you're allowed to enter that yellow tape, one thing will happen first is your name will be put into a roster, and that roster becomes a document, and you may or may not be called into court. And court is not fun, especially when you show up there at 7 in the morning, and they say, oh no, we won't need you till 10, but don't leave. And then 2 in the afternoon, they say, oh, we really don't need you today, thank you for coming. You're like, really? And they don't even offer you coffee or a donut, which is bad. So if you cross the tape, if you're invited into it, your name will be put in that roster. And that includes with other officers. So most officers do not want to cross that tape because we don't want to go to court. So, and the reason we keep everyone out of the crime scene because they're the one that's seen to be contaminated. It could be as simple as you walking in and kicking a shell casing. It shows if it was here and the shooting was here, you kick the casing 20 feet away, then we start thinking, well, there are multiple shooters? So it contaminates it. And don't think of the scene as just being stuff that's on the ground. The body itself of the victim is also part of that crime scene. Because there's evidence that we might need from in there. And that's why it's so important. Yes? The recap?
Diversion is in development.
And North Las Vegas is also in development. We've worked with them. We've taken our recap volunteers over there as well, because they've called upon us where they've had shootings and stuff, and they say, hey, can you guys help us out? Because from our office, from Office of Community Engagement. So yes, we've gone to those other cities and helped them. That answer? Okay. So when it comes to the crime scene, like I said, even that body is the crime scene. In the hospital, that could be the crime scene. So that's why it's important, when you go, what I tell people when you go to a crime scene, the best thing is if they say, hey, come in here, and they say, stand right there, just stand right there. Because if you go walking around, you might disturb something. You might unintentionally leave a shoe print or something somewhere, and then we're looking for something else. An example of that is years ago when I was a young officer, one of the things that they did was when you're in training is if there was something happening and they wanted to expose you to it, they would take you to it. 2 officers, a young officer and myself, went to this double homicide. And we were told right off the bat, don't touch anything, don't just go and see, and this is what the detectives are going to be doing. Because we were young kids, we were young cops. So the guy that I was with, he did one of these numbers. There were bodies in the closet. Leaned in and looked. Then he peeled his hand off. What did that do? He left a perfect handprint on that wall. Perfect. And he bought me lunch for 2 weeks after that. Because they were looking at him as a possible suspect. He contaminated that scene by putting his hand on that wall and just looking. Then they had to do DNA sample, get hair samples and all that stuff. And you figure they just cut it, but they can't cut it. They get it in, pull that darn thing, and it hurts. Not fun. But again, that's why you learn from those things. So I learned when they say, hey, we have, this happening over here, I'm like, good, I'll be over here. Or if I go somewhere, I stand somewhere and I keep my hands in my pocket, don't touch anything, because if you contaminate that scene, it gives extra work and extra longer to solve things. Trauma and grief, okay.
Crime.
Yep. And you didn't grab your mic, but that's okay. You didn't get the hospital? Okay. There's always one. Hospital, big building with sick people in it.
Look up.
But,
If you're dispatched to the hospital as a recap responder, you are considered on the job and at a crime scene. Number one, always tell the hospital security that you're there. Look for an officer from LVMPD who might kind of sort of look like they're in charge. And understand that even people around in the waiting room, they might be an extension of a bigger investigation that's going on. And so that's
and the most
why it's
important thing when you go to the hospital, again, you're going there as a recap volunteer. Most of the hospitals that receive trauma level hospitals, UMC, Sunrise, they know about recap. They know that our recap responders will have the badge, volunteer recap, and you're there with an officer, and they know what you're there for. Most of the times they'll direct you, hey, the patrol officer's over there if you want to talk to them. But definitely look for that metro officer, talk to them, and they'll tell you what they're going to need, for us to do. I've seen it, and this is what I love about you guys. We had a incident where a young lady, early 20s, her husband or the father of her child was trying to kill the baby. The young lady's brother saw this, shot the guy, shot him. One of the rounds went through him and hit the baby. 22-month-old baby. I had a pastor come with me, say, hey, let's go to the hospital. We were there. This woman was on the ground, on the floor, crying. And this is why I love you guys. That pastor got on his hands and knees, went right to where she was, comfort her, asked her, do you want to pray? She said yes. He prayed. God listened. And that little baby was okay. And this is why I love you guys. Because you will do things that most people won't do. You'll go to where the need is, and you'll meet that person there. So the hospital is part of the crime scene. So you go, and there'll be an officer there to help you and guide you and direct you. And you just do, what God has called you to do. And again, most importantly, listen at the same time, because they don't always work where the person is just one person. Sometimes there's other family members on the background, and as you're there doing this, you might have someone else talking about all kinds of crazy stuff, and that could be an opportunity for you to go and say, listen, this is what's going on, their officers are working on it, and maybe you'll be able to diffuse something. And sometimes that you won't have that opportunity. Sometimes they'll just be too loud, and you're like, okay, that's okay. So don't ever put yourself in a situation where you might get hurt. So if you don't feel comfortable with something, Just step away from it. That's okay. Find the officer in the uniform, say, hey, I'm here, and just so you know, there's stuff happening over there.
Your safety is very important to us. So never go into a situation where you feel uncomfortable. Okay. Yeah, and we're going to move on. So did that cover the hospital? Thank you. Before we do this, I just wanted to say that I'd like for Pastor Jose to come up and talk a little bit about the role of this church, how he's developed this amazing response mechanism. And I just want to circle back around to something that Tony was talking about a little while ago, and he was talking about how he gets mean and he tells people, I don't know you. But the whole point of that story and what he left out was over the years, he's come back to the office and said, oh my goodness, I just met a new recruit that told me that they became a cop because of me. And that happened over and over again. And the job satisfaction that he has felt that I've experienced is because not only has he influenced young people, but he's been a mentor and a guide to them, and he's impacted them so much because he gives them enough love. You know, that one person that can show you that you're somebody, you're seeing them through the eyes of God, I guess, right? And you're telling them you are somebody, and you can do something different, and you can make a different choice. And so that's what he didn't tell you about that initial, I don't know you. I'm like, oh, you did? You arrested me 5 times, but now I'm a cop. No. Pastor Jose, come on up. The other thing I want to say is we almost didn't come today because Kelly wasn't available. And Pastor Jose very firmly said, oh no, Deborah and Tony are coming to church on Wednesday night, and they are going to make their presentation, and we're both going to be leaving Metro at the end of the year, so we could not say no to you, ever.
Well, we have something a little special for you guys at the end,
Oh, okay.
because we love you guys. I might even attempt to hug him or something. I don't know. This could get really crazy here. You know, we have our additional training, and what I mean by that is I call them techniques. We started developing these techniques and so forth, and prevention is really a big part of the program here. As this COVID thing starts to lift, every month we go to our area command and we find out what is the hot spot. You know, what is the spot that you're having the most trouble with this month? And we'll do an event there. And we work with 22 other nonprofits. And when we have these events, you know, we have food there with the people. The officers pass out the food with us. That way that bridge is being built, you know, in between the community and our officers, you know, and so forth. When they come, it's awesome because instead of having to go to a bunch of different nonprofit, you know, different agencies, they're all there all at once, and they receive a lot of help from a lot of areas. I'm going to share with you techniques real quick that we have developed. Okay, they talked about the hospital. Okay, we have faced many situations in hospitals, opposite families. Okay, families of the perpetrator or the one that committed the crime, families of the ones that were the victims. You got it? That could be a really hostile environment right there in the hospital. So how we deal with that is we go in as a team, and a couple of you guys have done this with me, and there's 3 of us. One will approach one family, one will approach the other family, and one will sometimes be asked to go inside, you know, where the actual surviving victim is or whatever. And what you do, one of our techniques is, let's say this is a family, or we've had it where we've had 2 opposite gangs there in the waiting room, you know, and they're looking at one another. So one of the techniques that we have developed, remember, we have more than one person when we go to the hospital, so we have a team of 3. And what she'll do is she'll kick back, and it was amazing. One particular time, you had all these hardcore gang members, and there was a grandma there. And she was the grandma of the guy that was in charge. So you look for that stuff, and okay, I'll approach grandma. And if I talk to grandma, she'll cool everybody else down. You get where I'm coming from? It was beautiful. You go and talk to grandma. Grandma goes over to, we'll use the name Frankie, since, Frankie, don't you start no mess here. Because and Frankie listens to grandma. Wouldn't listen to the officer, wouldn't listen to me, but listen to who? Grandma. So you have to spot the leader. You got it? And in situations like that, you want to keep families from going, even families going into with one another, and one will go to one family member. You try to find the alpha person, the person that can really take control. So instead of you a lot of times trying to take control of a situation where there'll be hostility or something, you just single one person, you talk to that one person, and then they'll go and diffuse, the situation. Here's another technique. One guy, my wife was with me, one guy just got out of prison. I mean, this guy was hardcore, and his daughter got shot in the face. That was on Merlin Parkway. She was holding his grandson. He's not too happy. He's gone out and hurt somebody. You get it? Here's a great technique. Are you ready? Watch. You don't need to go out and shoot that guy or anything like that. He says, you're going to ruin your life. You just got out of prison yourself. Your family needs you. Your daughter just got shot in the face. You got this grandbaby. Why don't you let Metro do your dirty work? That's what they get paid for. Why should you ruin your life? Let them do the job. You know what I'm saying? Why should you do it? Your family needs or not? Let Metro. They get paid for it. Let them do it for you. Let them take your vengeance out. Guess what? Those tools work. And in our little training that we do and so forth, we'll just put a bunch of keys into your hands. You get it? And the other one, and I'll stop with this, is the snitch. Got it? We taught an apartment complex what a good snitch is. It was a 13-year-old boy. He was beat to death, thrown out in the desert, wrapped in a piece of carpet, like a piece of trash. Do you know that people in that apartment complex had heard stuff happening? But nobody to want to be a snitch. And some of us have that culture in us. And we got to teach the entire apartment complex that somebody should have been a good snitch. So that little boy would have been alive. You get it? The first time I went out on a hardcore call-out was on June 22nd, 2013. I have a video of it. The crime scene was already taken care of. There was just a bloody truck. It was horrible. We're talking an 11 and a 13-year-old. One was stabbed like 9 times. The other one was more than 10. Horrible. I have a video of it. Why would I take a video of, remember the crime scene, everything was done, but there's the truck with blood on it. And I have a video of that to remind me. This is what this is all about. A kid came out. It was his grandmother's truck. And he looks at me and he goes, I gotta clean this. And he goes, I had just talked to both those kids the day before. He was a good kid. He was a church-going kid. The one that was going to clean his grandma's bloody truck. It was a mess. And he told me, I just talked to them. I try to tell the men to, get away from that stuff, da-da-da. And he was traumatized because he's having to clean the blood. So we got to minister to him. He was a good kid. You get it? But he had to clean the blood of the kids that he tried to help the day before. You get it? And we told him, God had you there. You were a stop sign. And you were trying to get him to stop. You're a stop sign. But you know what? Just like a driver goes through a stop sign, they went through the stop sign. They didn't listen. They didn't stop. Boom. You might want to help, you could help them clean the truck. There's so many different ways. So we got to minister to him, and he did all right because he had done what he was supposed to do, and he needed that. Okay, he was okay. I did what I was supposed to do. I did my best. Okay, I feel okay now. Will somebody help me clean the truck up? He didn't want to do it by himself. Amen? So just be ready for different situations. And there's situations where you need a grandma, like Mama Maritza, to go talk to another grandma. It's not all the high volume deal. You get where I'm coming from? It's not the hardcore crime stuff. Like with the accidents, going over and talking to a family. We're Christians. There was a Muslim family, had 2 people killed in an accident. A truck, that's 2 Muslim families were going across the street. And this big, one of those big trucks with the big tires, killed 2. We went and ministered to them. You got it? We respected their culture, but we got to minister to them. And they ended up inviting us and, doing things that are quite honoring, when they respect you and so forth. So you'll be going to different Christian denominations. You'll be dealing with atheists, whatever. But you're there to be the love of God. Amen? So I'm going to be quiet. We're going to we'll let you guys know when we do our little... we're going to give you tools, okay? So, God bless.
Awesome. Now, touching on grief, there's a lot of stuff that when you speak to people about what they're going through, just be mindful, and you'll learn this probably when you do your in-house training. Just be mindful about what you say or even what you don't say. Things like, it's on the handout. I heard a voice tell me that. Yes. They went out to say, yes. Believe me, this happened for a reason. Really, what good reason is it for your loved one to get killed? They're in a better place. Really? It's for the best of it. For who? Look at the bright side. Could you imagine if you lost someone you love and someone tells you that? I'd have to punch him. With love, of course. But listen, you just sit there. Sometimes the best thing that you could do for someone is just sit there and listen. And we all know that. We've all, I shouldn't say this because I don't know, but me, I've had times in my life where things felt like, holy smokes, and I get sad or I get this and that, and and my wife would say, hey, what's wrong? I said, I don't know, I just feel this way. And she'll listen to me, but sometimes that's what you need, someone just to listen to you. So remember that when you go out to help these folks, to comfort them. Sometimes just sitting there listening is the best thing you could do. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so we'll skip this. You guys know where you're gonna go to.
A friend in the last few weeks who lost a son in a shooting, and really there are no words. Just standing with them, being love. And a lot of this work, we used to do a very long training. Back in the day, it was 8 hours, and then we went down to 4, and now we're down to like an hour and a half or 2, sometimes less if it's a very experienced and organized situation. But it is something that you learn as you go on, and it's situational. So you always have to lean into your common sense and use that toolbox that the pastor was talking about, what Pastor Jose was talking about. It's an important little toolbox.
It's hard. This afternoon before we came here, my sister called me. I have a nephew that's dying. He's 29 years old. He has stage 4 cancer. It's my little brother's son. He's going to die sometime soon. So I talked to my brother, and I'm like, yeah, I could. I sometimes say stuff that, is off the wall, and
No.
I'm not politically correct and any of that stuff, but I did not know what to tell my brother. And I told him, I said, I don't know what to tell you except that I love you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you see, sometimes, being there and listening is the best thing.
And as a church, you have opportunities to actually minister, and we have found a lot of people find their new home church or bond or find God again. My friend, she was raised by scientists and had no faith, had never walked into a church in her life. But her son, 2 years ago, he was seeking God, and he started studying catechism, and 6 months before he died, he had been baptized. And that church was the saving grace for that family, for that funeral. And when she got up to do the eulogy, she said, I look forward to seeing my son in the afterlife, in God's kingdom. And I said, well, you see, God's working all the time. So the last portion of this is really easy peasy. Okay, well, you do all of these things, so we're not going to go into that. But there's some purple forms, and usually you organize this, all right? Your church organizes this, your organization. They're signed. They're not dated, but they're signed. Just so live streaming people, there are a few people that are live streaming that are not members of our Father's house. They might be with the chaplaincy in Nevada, and you might be some rogue people that I invited because you want to participate. So if you are one of those individuals, we'll tell you my email at the end of this so that you can get with me directly. If you're with Chaplaincy of Nevada, get with Debbie Damron. She's your coordinator for recap. But these purple forms need to be filled out. They're signed by me, and my last day is January 7th, so please get into Fingerprint Bureau before January 7th with your filled out form. There are no restrictions per se if you have a criminal record. We don't encourage anyone who's on probation or parole, has open warrants or open cases to participate at that phase 1 level. But if you're honest and you follow up with the background check, usually it comes to our desk and we vet it and we send them back to the church, and then you give them out here, the IDs pretty much, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So don't be, and a lot of people always get intimidated. Well, I have a record. I'm an ex-felon. And, there's nothing wrong with that. We all know that God is a God of how many chances, right? So you're here for a reason. So just be honest and write it down. I did this. Done.
You have to go into Fingerprint Bureau. I'm sorry, I cannot make it so that you can just send them in. You have to renew once a year on your anniversary or thereabouts. We do this because we're police and we need to vet you every single year to make sure you didn't get those warrants or were arrested for something. Let's see. Yes, they will take fingerprints. They will issue you a picture ID that says recap. I think my father's house has policies and protocols that are separate and apart from the types of things that we say. But if you're only doing phase 2, which is some of those community events, you don't, from our point of view, you don't have to get that ID. But from your organization's point of view, the pastor may like for you to have that ID so that when they dispatch you, we all know who you are, and that's just fine.
Yep.
So we have them here. I don't know if we're going to give them out individually or you're going to hold on to them at the office. But our office will call Sherry from the church here, or Lisa. Who's Lisa? Have I met Lisa? Hi, Lisa. Oh, yes, we've met. And she'll just and she'll give them out. And that's about it, really. I will say this: as a group, if you give me a call or text me or email me and say, Deborah, we want to go as a group on a Saturday, I will make appointments for you. Right now, they used to expedite a fingerprint, and then something happened, and the changing of the guards occurred, and they got a little cranky, and they were not bringing you through the process fast enough for me. I don't want you to be there all afternoon waiting to do volunteer work for us. But right now with COVID, it may not be a bad idea to have our office make appointments for you, and I could do that. And Saturday seems to be a good, I'm being told it's a good time of the week to do that if you
And
have
they're
Saturday
open-
morning.
Yep, and they're open 7 days a week, even on Sundays,
Okay.
after church, of course.
All right, you have anything
Yes,
else?
your
All right,
email.
so yes, okay, so my email is diazanddeborah13776r@lvmpd.com. Anybody listening to the live stream, send me an email tomorrow. I will send you the PowerPoints. I'll send the PowerPoint here to the pastor, and we'll make arrangements for you to get your application and get processed through. Thank you. We always enjoy it. I think it's fitting that we do our last training here at my father's house. Yeah. There is none.
Oh. All right, pop it up. No, there is none.
No. If you become a Metro volunteer and go
Doing things the way you do it, it works out well, because you have the list of people that you, and you know when they could respond and not respond.
So, you know, Pastor, for the future, we've decentralized this component of the recap program. In the event with the $21 million budget shortfall, they will not be bringing anyone to replace us. So what we've done is we've trained all of the area command COP teams to conduct their own training and their own recruitment. And hopefully somebody will be able to stand in, but they'll be from the area command. And we're hoping that they'll be able to, they won't be as good as us at it, but you know, I'm hoping they could, you know, step up to the challenge. But we've tried to do that, and we thought of every possible scenario, and we just want to preserve the program and make sure the integrity of the program is sound, and that's what we've been doing for the last several months.
And again, I want to say thank you to my father's house, Pastor Jose. You guys are amazing, and we truly do enjoy coming here and doing this training for you guys. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.